Oh, I can't hear it. Oh,
You can't hear it?
no. Maybe your mic went out. Maybe it hit it out. What do you wanna do? We can dance with no music. We can start over. The world is your oyster.
Thank God, because I am hearing it. I am
You
totally hearing the music. And this is great for this conversation that we're about to have. When you like dance to the beat of a different drum, or you hear music that other people don't hear.
nobody else can hear. And you
Right?
stay on beat because you know how that song goes.
Well, no, I had it piping into my ears. The
Uh,
other thing that's interesting is we did a soundtrack.
we
Oh, we
did.
did a, oh, you know what happened, Shannon?
Mm,
I went out and came back in because my system glitched.
mm, mm.
Hang on just a second. Let's
It's
do
okay.
this because
Let's
our people need the music.
yeah.
They're going to see a little behind the scenes of what happens here when we're
Yeah.
doing our music.
Yes.
All right, let's do it again. You
I'm
ready?
I'm ready for it. Oh, yeah. Get it. Yeah. Who? I still need more moves. I know we've been talking about it for a while, but if you guys have some good StreamYard moves, let us know.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
StreamYard move. We're gonna have to bring Sati on for people to see her again and give us our, we've got our unity,
Mhm.
we have our drawing down the
Mhm.
wisdom.
Yeah. What else
Right.
did we have?
I
It
don't
was
know.
like
It's been
3
a
that we know. I know it's been a
right. It's
minute
been
since
a
the first
minute.
conference.
We need to have another dance session
Yeah.
with Sati so
We
we
need a
can
refresher course.
right. So Sati, we know you're listening, and we're ready for a refresher course.
Mhm.
and our and our people who watch us are probably ready for a refresher course. Those of y'all that are listening, we dance in every
Yes,
week when we are live. So one of the things you miss when you are listening after the fact is our incredible dance moves.
it's true. It's true, it's true. How are
How are
you
you, my
doing?
friend? You go first.
Mm. I always try to be concise here. I'm good. I'm good. I just came back from Hiram speaking, and yeah,
For
it was a
folks that don't know, tell them what Hiram is.
yeah, so Hiram is a high school that I went to, and it is in Hiram, right? So people are like, "Where is Hiram?" They usually don't know, country town. I was thinking about, how I always say we pass the cows on the bus, and I passed the cows today. I said, "Yep, we're almost by the school." So I always think about you ladies when I think about the grass and the feed, and yeah, I get the
Mhm.
connectedness. But it's by Douglasville, Powder Springs, and that's the area that I grew up in here in Georgia.
Nice. And
Mhm.
I love that they love to have you back as one of their inspirational speakers every year. And
You're so
you've been doing that a couple of years now, right?
I don't think I think the only time I wasn't doing it was probably when I was in college. I didn't go back too much. I went to a few of the football games, right? Being the
Hmm.
coolest fan nerd ever, of course. But I was more doing the events on campus at Kennesaw. Those were my students when I was a
Right.
student, when I was in college. But since being in school, I think I've been back probably every year.
Nice. I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah, we started talking about next year today, so I'm excited.
Mm, so
Yeah.
fun.
Thank you. What
So
about you?
fun. Yeah. Oh, I managed to triple book myself. So this week I have had three sets of company,
Mm,
which included an extra dog. My
yes.
nibblings are here who are four
Mhm.
years old and just the
Yes.
loves of my life, but they're 4-year-old twins. And it's been fun. It's been adventurous.
Yeah.
And I'm a little askew with my wellness this week just because of taking care of other people.
I
So, yeah. But
understand.
I'm grateful to be here. I
Yeah.
am, yeah, doing
Yeah.
good.
I hated to miss the park trip the other day and, doing laundry, getting ready for work. Like, I could be outside playing with my friends right now, playing with
Mhm.
the nibblings, but everything
Right.
falls in place. Everything
Right.
falls in place. They're getting so big.
Oh, we had such a good time. We went over to Autry Mill Nature Preserve. And for locals, if you haven't been there, sweet little nature preserve in Alpharetta,
Mhm.
Georgia. They've got goats, they've got chickens, they've got ducks, they've got a giant tortoise. If the visitor center's open, you can see snakes and different
Mhm.
kinds of reptiles. And
I
um,
love stuff like
it
that.
is, yeah, it's donation based, and they've got hiking trails. They've got miles of hiking trails that go down to a little river, and it's all in town. So like it's easy to reach, and there's picnic tables, and there's some heritage buildings from, the 1800s that they describe what was happening. And yeah, and we met over there with several of our Women Connected in Wisdom authors and just had a good time. And it was beautiful day, beautiful day. So it
Yeah.
was, just gathering the community, gathering and checking it out. And the only big bummer
Mm.
was that you weren't allowed to feed the animals. And I don't know if that's just on a Sunday, because
Okay.
usually you get to feed them. So I
Okay.
don't know if they just got full on Saturday. So they were like, no feeding. I don't know. Because I've
Mm.
never been there that's not the case. But
Okay.
often I go during the week. And so maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
But the scouts do
Good
a
to know.
whole bunch of work in that park. So they
Mm.
do a lot of projects, the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts do. So it's beautiful and it's fun, and yeah, I highly recommend it. So
I love
good
that.
place to hang out and throw a frisbee and go for some hikes, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty cool. But
Yeah, I was talking
we
about
missed you.
specifically this week. Yes, I miss you ladies.
Yeah.
We're planning stuff, we're talking about getting together and book signings and all the things that we do to continue to collaborate and stay connected. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that's what I was talking about with the students earlier. They're like, well, what about your life? And, I asked them, do you want to know about college? You want to know about high school or businesses and stuff and where I am right now? And this group of seniors wanted to know about college. So I was telling them about my 5 classes and 3 jobs, and they're asking about life outside of that. And, I'm showing them, well, the things you do can build the life that you want, but that social
Right.
time, definitely got to make a schedule for it. But I think what we should make space for right now is our intro, because I know we're a good bit into the show and we have this amazing guest to bring up on stage. What do you
Let's
say?
do it. Let's do it.
Yes. Okay, y'all. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and Amazon best-selling publisher, author, and all-natural product manufacturer. I am a champion for your natural self-care, sustainable business care, and overall intentional wellness.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, Amazon best-selling author and publisher, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Together, we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom community.
And we like to get together every week for intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness.
Mhm.
How do we do it?
Yes. So
Right?
important. So important because when you have different stages, then you do it differently. As soon as you finally figure it out, here goes another stage or part of an old one
Right?
that's still a new stage. So it's kind of different. And
I
the
think
thought,
that's a myth that we figure it out.
hmm yes, yep, and that you stop learning. All the seniors are like, I'm
Right?
done with school. I'm like, y'all, this does not stop.
Right?
Just so you know,
Right?
like, don't even.
If you're done with school as a senior, that's where you stay, right? Like we've
Mhm,
met people like that, especially when we
mhm,
come from small towns,
mhm,
right? You've met folks that that's where they stopped.
mhm,
And I'm with you. I don't want to stop. I want to keep learning and growing and stretching myself. But
mhm.
as long as we own businesses, I think that's always going to be the case.
Right? And I mean, even in roles and stuff, even if you do have children in middle school or high school, whatever your story has been, right? You still have children of older ages and get married, and there's all these things and roles that you're gonna keep learning. The question is just how
Right?
old do you learn, and what do you do with the lessons that you partake in?
Well, and today we're talking about intellectual wellness. So this is perfect. And
Yeah,
I'm delighted to jump into this conversation.
me too.
If you're ready, you
I'm
ready?
ready. Let's do
All
it.
right, let's give our listeners the definition we're working from. So,
Yes.
y'all, our Women Connecting Wisdom definition for intellectual wellness. Intellectual wellness includes having access to different sources of information and developing critical thinking and timely decision making skills. Also, continual learning through intentional intellectual growth, situations, and artistic creativity can help maintain one's intellectual capacity.
Mhm. So good.
I always, the creativity part always jumps out at me every time we reach that. What did you do this week for creativity?
Ooh, this week. So one thing I did, and I know the other week I was talking about being connected, I used my time creatively. There was a time when, for a boundary, I would have gotten off the phone very late at night talking to a team member. I said, you know what? I'm going to be spontaneous with my time, right? Invest the time to build this relationship, listen to what's going on, build the foundation for everything. And I'm still in training, right? So I'll count it as training hours. Um, but I was creative with the way that went, because if you would have talked about Shannon's non negotiables, the boundaries, the system she's setting up, that call wouldn't have happened that way. But
Mm,
I was creative and I went with the
mm,
flow.
right.
Yeah. What
Okay.
about you?
Oh, I'm thinking about the artistic creativity. And this week, in between meetings, I've been running down and painting with the nibblings.
Mm,
So my sister's in town for work, so my nibblings are here, and I have taken off as much time as I can. But
right.
when you run businesses and do the contracts we have and things like that, like there's
Yes.
some I can't take off. So
Right.
my daughter's Alex is supporting us this week, and so in between meetings, I've been running down and doing gel printing.
Oh,
Um, it's so fun
what
and
is gel?
figuring out. So gel printing is this squishy, it's like a gel mat, and
Okay.
you put paint on it,
Mhm.
and then you lift up the paint or the design by putting your paper over it and you roll it. And
Mhm.
then there's a technique which I'm figuring out, like, I mean, this is a stretch for me, is where
Yeah.
you can then transfer designs from magazines onto the paint and lift it up. And out of the mouths of babes, right?
Yeah.
I follow people on Instagram, and I was showing the 4-year-old the video, and the Nux looks at me and goes, Tia, they make it look so easy. And I go, yeah, they do. And it's
Yeah, they
not
do.
working this way here, is it? It
Mhm.
was hysterical, but so fun, like learning something new and figuring out how we're going to do it together and
Mhm.
creating art, right? It does stretch me. And it also gives my brain a rest from other things.
Mhm.
So then I'm ready to jump back in.
Right. And what I did do, if you like on the artsy side, right, were the graphics for our new
Mhm,
season. So,
mhm.
we talk about grouping stuff together. I do those at one time. And I have some stuff I'm looking forward to after the season as we go into the 20 something seasons. Um, but even that, when we talk about intellectual wellness today, again at the school, I was talking about capacity. And when you're doing something, okay, you might have this idea, but does it need to happen right now? I pushed it to the next season and changed it a little bit. So I still was creative, still got that rest, but I didn't overwhelm myself unnecessarily.
Right.
So that's kind of what I've been dancing with recently.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
I am so ready to get our guest up on stage. You want to introduce her?
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
And you guys, we always have the option of different bios, right? Long, short. We talk about the bios for the book, for the volumes of ladies that we help write these Amazon bestsellers. But today, I'm not going to read through all of it. But if you're interested in what we're talking about, which I know all of our listeners and guests who download the podcast are, I want you to go back and read Kate Arm's whole bio, okay? Because her certifications, all the work that she has put in is in here, but I'm going to read the top part so that we can spend the majority of the time in our conversation. Okay. Kate Arms has been helping smart and sensitive people thrive since 1984. When she realized she could turn the lonely outlier kids in her middle school into a group of friends, she has learned through experience that every person has the power to improve the culture of a group with or without formal authority. She specializes in thriving in complexity and helping people manage conflict in healthy ways. As a professional coach, she brings a trauma informed approach to helping adults who have struggled with anxiety, depression, and trauma, and is committed to gender aware and gender inclusive coaching. Her career has taken her through law, technology, publishing, nonprofits, and the arts. She has seen firsthand that the same set of skills improves the culture in every industry. Whether she was an agile coach, customer service rep, individual creative contributor, project manager, lawyer, director, board member, or company founder, she has been honing her skills and improving cultures. As a leader, she has a reputation for getting exceptional performance out of her direct reports, delivering quality results with limited resources, and creating engaged teams that have fun through the process of working hard and delivering excellence. Help us welcome to the stage our expert guest, Kate Arms. Hi, Kate.
I
Welcome to
I
the
always get a
stage.
little bit of like, oh my goodness, is that me when my
It's
bio
you.
gets read?
Yes, yes. And like I said, I invite the listeners to go listen to the rest of it because it's worth it. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Well, thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you today.
Of course. So when we talk about transcending the labels of ADHD and autism, can you tell the listeners a little bit about what you do and where the passion behind your company comes from?
Mm, yeah. The company that is particularly focused on this at the moment is the Neurodiversity Coaching Academy that I founded with a colleague of mine about a year ago.
Mhm.
And we came together because I was working with a lot of people who, if they had diagnoses of ADHD or autism, they weren't talking about them, but I could see the signs of those kinds of neurodiversities in my clients. And
Yes.
she was working in ADHD specific coaching. And we
Mhm.
were talking about the limitations that I was finding in some of my teachings and coachings and my coach training that wasn't really diversity inclusive in the space where people weren't talking about it. And then
Mhm.
she was talking about how in ADHD coaching, there's a bunch of stuff that the wider coaching community can handle that is it's able to be more transformative and more positive than a lot of the ADHD coaching, which is how do we help people cope with having ADHD rather than how do we help people who happen to have this diagnosis have a great life or have a great career.
Mhm.
And so we came together and we were like, what are the places where the labels help and what are the places where the labels don't help? And how can coaching in a way that acknowledges the characteristics and the nervous system functionality
Mhm.
that lead to these diagnoses, what if we can coach in a way that acknowledges that reality but isn't stuck on the labels, can we do more? And the answer that we've come to is yes.
Mhm. Gladly, right? Gladly. And again, so thankful for your work. And it makes sense what you're talking about the difference between, I would say, the inside and the outside perspective, right? So, how would you, can you, I'll say it this way. Can you speak more to when you say the label hurts and when you feel like it helps?
Yeah, so for most people, the journey through getting a label and then sort of figuring out what that means
Mm.
starts by people saying like this is weird about you or this
Yeah.
is odd or maybe even wrong about
Mhm.
you, something's not right.
Mhm.
And that sense of something's wrong, when you get a label, if you get a diagnosis, if you get, you could put a finger on it and go, okay, now I have something to understand myself with. Now
Right.
I have a way of actually wrestling with this in a way that's more nuanced, that gives me a sense of there are other people like me,
Mhm.
and there are things that people know about how to make life easier if you're like me.
Right.
And then there's this piece of activism that's very, very common right now, which is let's not talk about this as a disability. Let's talk about this as a set of characteristics, some of which make navigating the world harder. And some of them the world makes harder than it has to be because of how the
Right.
world is designed in this sort of interesting advocacy piece.
Mhm.
And there's a place that people sometimes, and this is a place that Tracy and I are really helping people get to when we can, that actually goes beyond that a little bit, that actually is like, this is part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am.
Right.
And sometimes in those places, people actually drop the labels and stop identifying with the labels as a sense of who they are because those labels came out of a history of telling people what was wrong with them and analyzing what was wrong with people. And so sometimes to actually go, okay, I'm just a complete person and I have these characteristics which sometimes make life hard and sometimes make life easy.
Right.
That getting beyond the label is sometimes helpful for people.
Thank you so much for that. I love it.
Kate, I'm so excited about this conversation. As someone who was diagnosed with ADHD when I think I was 19 in college, but also in my coaching, like have coached so many folks on the spectrum, right? Because they came to me because they knew I could relate and understand. So I am so excited about the work you're doing with other coaches, right? Because I've found over the years a lot of things that are our superpowers, or like it's just a tweak, right? It's a tweak for the systems as they're currently set up to say, okay, if you tweak it this way, like we do great, right? So I'm curious about in this coaching academy that you're doing, like, we love, first of all, on this podcast, authentic stories and resources, right?
Yep.
So like if somebody's listening to this podcast and they do identify as someone with ADHD or autism or somewhere on the spectrum, or has a kiddo that does, right? When you think about tools that you're teaching coaches for their clients, is there something you can share that parents or people themselves might be able to use?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really, really common in sort of ADHD specific coaching or autism specific coaching or dyslexia specific coaching or something that's specifically in there is a lot of tools, a lot of very specific, like try this tool, do this tool, do this tool. And parents or people who are in their lives who are looking at tools often go through a very long process of trying a tool and it doesn't work, and trying a tool and it doesn't work, and trying a tool and it doesn't work. And then they find something that a part of works and they're really grateful for it. So I sort of flip that on its head. And I say the fundamental principle that coaching in the neurodiversity inclusive space depends on is assuming that people think and process sensory input in such different ways that when we try and guess what's going on in somebody else's head and how they're processing and what they mean when they say something, or whether something feels hot or cold or loud to them, that we are wrong more often than we are right. So we have to actually get really curious about the ways in which we are misunderstanding people left, right, and center.
So I heard you saying that, get curious.
Get curious.
Get curious about what other people are thinking or what's happening for them.
Yeah. And it's not just about what other people are thinking and what's happening for them. It's also, what are the assumptions that I'm making about, like, when I see that behavior? If I did that behavior, it would probably come from this source. What assumptions am I now making about somebody else because I'm seeing a behavior that might come from a really different place if I did it?
Right. Oh, that's a good thing. Well, I also, what's bubbling up for me as you say that too, is especially recently, like when people find out I have ADHD, or if I say something related to it, they're like, oh yeah, I have that too. Like, because the way the world is kind of set up right now with technology, with, Instagram bites, with reels, like, it is, a lot of people have short attention spans, right? And so we don't know, like, used to, I mean, when you think about back when we were growing up, right? Most of the time it was young boys who got diagnosed, who couldn't sit still, who were in trouble all the time. Part of the reason I didn't get a diagnosis until I was in college was because I was a teacher's kid and I behaved. Like, now you looked back over my history and it was like, oh yeah, there were some clues there. But, it was really, I got to college and I failed. What did I fail? I think it was English Lit. I wanted to be an English major. And I did great on all the readings in the papers. But I realized I got out of high school without having to do a term paper because I was in honors and I did all the creative projects. And, man, you give me a creative project. First of all, I can do it the night before and make 100. Drove my parents nuts, right? But it was just the way like, whoa, great. But the executive function to do all the incremental steps to put a research paper together. Whoa.
Yeah.
Like now I can do it. And for our listeners that don't know, Kate and I met through Interplay. So I realized, and I don't even think I've had this discussion with you, Kate, like I realized after listening to Andrew Huberman's podcast on the power of play, that because I've been thinking for probably the last couple of years, man, is it my age that my ADD is getting better? What is it? Just all my coping skills? What is it? Because I'm a better shaper, right? I can do things now that I couldn't do before. And I realized after listening to his podcast that I've been doing so much interplay. I think some of my brain waves are changing. And the incremental steps and the way I can create things and the way I can do things, it's like, ooh, this is fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you point to something that's really, really important for coaches in this space to know, and for people who have diagnoses themselves or identify themselves in some of the characteristics, or have people they love around them, or work with people, or so basically everybody.
Right.
Basically,
that person you see at the grocery store that you're like,
is that like neuroplasticity is real.
Right.
And we rewire our brains. And there are ways of rewiring the brains that really help with a lot of these challenges. Yeah. One of the things that I thought you might be going towards when you brought up interplay, which interplay really, really brought for me, is so although I don't have a diagnosis of autism, and I have an ADHD diagnosis now because I know how to take a test that gets me a diagnosis. But definitely, but like that was like 6 weeks ago, and it was because I was curious about whether medication would help me. Like I didn't have to stretch the truth very far, but I talked about when I was before my coping mechanisms rather than like who I am now when I was doing that. One of the things that gets talked about a lot is the sensory sort of overwhelm. And it's uncomfortable to be in the body for autistic people and for ADHD people as well. One of the things that happens with ADHD is I'm uncomfortable, so I'm going to go somewhere else and do something else. Or something else strikes my fancy and gets my attention, and I'm going to be there away from whatever's uncomfortable. And the playful approach to being with the body that interplay uses was an incredibly gentle and welcoming and friendly and trauma sensitive in many ways way of inviting me and the people I was playing with into my body. And once you get there, then you start to actually have the right data that you need to do wise decision making based on values and what's really important, rather than just what's comfortable or uncomfortable in this moment. And play is a huge part of it, a huge part of it, because it's that ability to be open to possibilities that allows the brain to actually rewire itself. And so one of the things that happens, and this is related to the title of this podcast, that Transcending the Labels of ADHD and Autism, is that with ADHD, especially, the characteristics are like, were you like this before you were 7? And so how you change over time isn't so meaningful. But I know people who have grown out of autism diagnoses, who no longer qualify for the diagnosis of autism because they've actually transformed their body so that they don't have those characteristics in the behavior anymore.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's not, and it's incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of support and it's not possible for everybody. And so it's really important to sort of know that it's so unique, it's so
Mm,
personal, and it's possible.
mm. So can we go more in detail there? When you say you were with these coaching clients and you notice some characteristics, right? What are characteristics that you would say are telltale signs that somebody has an opportunity to see what they need in this area? And then what were the things that they were able to change their habits and change their bodies that you were just alluding to?
Yeah. So the patterns that I see
Mhm,
are um, needing to do things the way that I've always done them, uh, not being able to focus on the things that I think I should focus on, having like really like when I'm interested, I'm super interested, and when I'm not interested, I have a hard time motivating myself uh, to get work done. Difficulty breaking things down from a big picture into like what is the next incremental step that I need to take. Sometimes a sense of paralysis when a project feels too big, sort of easily getting overwhelmed and needing help thinking through how to break it down into a manageable task. There's there's a way that really smart people who have these characteristics think really, really well about what's not possible
mhm,
and can get really stuck in a let me explain to you why that's not going to work
mm.
cycle.
Yeah.
Uh, and some of it is behavior, or some of it is some of the time management. Like I don't put things in my calendar enough, and I have to actually build the discipline and the practice of making
Right.
sure that if I call myself from my car and leave myself a voicemail um, on my landline, which I used to do, and now I don't do it anymore because I leave a voice memo on my phone, but that needs to actually get into my calendar.
Mhm,
Uh, I mean, like connecting the dots there.
mm,
And so some of what coaches can help people do is that sort of tactical stuff.
mhm,
I specialize in the what is it that that's actually underneath whatever your coping mechanism is? What
mhm,
is it that that coping mechanism is helping you avoid? And
mm,
then what are more flexible ways that you might also deal with that same challenge so that you have options? So that if we can come up with 4 or 5 different strategies you might have access to and ways to practice them so that
mm.
when you go to a meeting, you can be flexible when the other people in the room have different ways that they want to work rather than you needing them to work the way that you do. And that's something that it's hard to articulate what the wins are, and it can transform somebody's ability to collaborate and work well with others. Um, yeah, like some of the stuff is really subtle, but really profound. And that's the stuff that I really love.
Yes. Yes, I hear you. One of the students earlier was asking, like, what happens if, for example, she was talking about going to the gym early, you know? So I said, if you know you want that as a goal, maybe you just do it at a different time. Maybe in the morning is not realistic, right? But sometimes if it's a pattern and things that keep coming up, maybe it's bigger than that. I hadn't thought about that. You know, maybe we take this assessment and see where we are on the spectrum so that we can get the tailored resources that we need instead of trying to move the time or fix something that might not go all the way to the root of what we're dealing with. It's
Yeah.
important.
And it might be that uh, if you have a really sensitive nervous system and you set a goal and you don't do it today,
Mhm,
you might actually need a lot more self care than somebody else in terms of it's okay, it's normal. This is how habit building happens.
mhm.
Start again tomorrow
Yeah.
and try. Um, if your nervous system is quick to go to, I'm never going to get this from I didn't get this today,
Mhm,
actually stopping in the middle there and saying, no, this is how habit formation happens. This is how rewiring the brain happens so that you have new habits happens. And that there's not always time in life for people to take that time to talk to themselves. And so one of the things that gets really important is carving out time to actually do that work. I know, Christine, you do self-care stuff all the time and community care stuff that looks like this all the time. So I know I'm talking your language.
No, I mean, I think it's valuable. I mean, our Western culture is not set up a lot of times to take the time to really process the thing you need to process and take care of yourself. I love the way you said it about if your nervous system is such that you need a little more, right? Um, I think that's important. You know, we were talking a little bit before the show, and I was trying to think about which way to get there. So I may just be taking a little bit of a left turn here. But, you know, we were talking about transcending the labels and why sometimes it's important and why sometimes labels help, you know, as you're trying to figure this out. And I just totally want to ask you, because I've been working on this myself personally, right? For years, I didn't talk about having ADHD, like, because it was something that was like what you were saying when you just came on about, oh, it was what was wrong with you, right? Like, I was too impulsive. I talked too much. I interrupted people. Like, you know, I can give you the list of things I got in trouble for in school and still get in trouble for sometimes if I'm not really grounded, right? So, I was thinking about our discussion about how we were talking about how do we get our needs met, right? Identifying special needs, and how do we get them met if we don't want to use those labels, if we don't want to say, I mean, because I think there is, you know, I do a lot of work in the accessibility justice realm and with alternate roots and in interplay, we're talking about diverse embodiment and inclusion. So, you know, there's a lot of, I have all this in my brain right now. It's like, you know, and ADA accessibility. And then how do you, but if you're not going to label it, how do you get your access needs met? And I don't even know really where the question is there, Kate. I'm just, all this is swirling. And
I think that part of the challenge is that so much depends on the size of the community that is involved when you're trying to get your access needs met.
Mhm.
In a small group, it is really, really powerful to normalize. None of us work the same way. So let's have a conversation about what are you sensitive to that we should be making, like what is each of us sensitive to that makes it hard for us to work? What are the conditions under which each of us work best? And how can we build a system that we're going to use when we work together that has elements that bring out the best of us as a collective? And that, if you can normalize that, then you can have conversations where people bring up whatever it is that their access needs are. And they don't need to be super unusual or super edgy if you just normalize having that conversation. And then if somebody has one that's a little more different, you sort of get curious. Okay, what impact does that have? What do you need from us? We haven't sort of, I'm not quite sure how to accommodate that. So if you get specific with me about what is the challenge for you, then I can get creative about how do I do something that that will work for you. And if we look at what those needs are and not the proposed solutions, and then get the whole group to say, so how are we going to work together? That gets really useful. Once you get to big groups, it gets harder. And the shorthand of the labels gets easier to use because with a big group, there probably aren't enough resources to actually meet everybody's accessibility needs, which is a very harsh reality.
Right.
And the things that make it easy for me to access may make it hard for 3 other people to access. And so with big groups, those shorthands help sort of create some categories that an organizer can use to sort of go, all right, this is the best that we can do, trying to sort of balance those categories out.
Mm,
It's so interesting that you said that because I was at dinner with one of my sister's colleagues the other day, and it was kind of tongue in cheek and joking about it, but basically said stereotypes save time sometimes.
mm,
Which I was like, of course I'm ruffled as my social justice person, but it's like what you were saying. Like, if you know, if or have a general idea, like when somebody says, oh, this person has ADHD, you kind of, most people nowadays know, okay, what does that mean, right? They
mm,
may not know how to meet those needs, right? Especially if they haven't worked with somebody like that before.
mm,
But I think about like when you think about stereotypes of engineers, or like that, and that's what he was actually talking about, was like when you think about different groups. I don't know, it's just interesting and I wanted you to define, what would you consider a large group or a small group?
So once you start to get above somewhere in the sort of 7 to 15 range, you
Yeah,
start to have much
yeah,
more likelihood that access needs are going to sort of conflict.
yeah,
Um, and once you get much bigger than that, you get to the place where um, a lot of organizations actually are balancing resources about
right,
what they can
right,
accommodate.
mm,
And one of the things that's really, really powerful is to be explicit about the choices that we're making when we're talking about accessibility, um, because to be honest about, we know we're not meeting your need,
mm.
hmm,
rather than you shouldn't need what you've asked for,
right,
is
right,
huge.
right. Yeah, it lands completely differently, doesn't it?
Right, like we're sad, like if we're like we don't have the resources to meet all of these needs and yours is one we have deprioritized, like there's a lot of grief there, but at least it's I've been included and considered and honored and recognized
And not ignored
and not ignored.
or like
At least in
erased,
that conversation. Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
That
there's a
makes sense.
lot of grief work in inclusion work.
Mm,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
that makes
That's
sense.
a good thing to name too.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to name.
So, when you think about intellectual wellness, Kate, as we bring all the different things that we have talked about together, what is something that you are doing specifically for yourself, for your wisdom and action this week?
So one of the things that I am doing is that I know that I have too many different things on my plate right now. And I get really tired when I have to switch between different kinds of projects.
Mhm,
And I know that if I push through that tired, I
mhm,
start making mistakes and I stop thinking well. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm noticing when I hit okay, I am fuzzy, mentally fuzzy now, and then giving myself permission to read a very
mhm.
silly novel.
A very silly novel?
A very silly novel.
Well, who was your favorite silly author?
So the one I'm reading now is a fantasy writer called Stephen Bruce.
Okay.
But I was reading Lewis Carroll 2 weeks ago, and so I like the mix of the classics and the modern writers. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
A very silly novel. That's
a very
funny.
silly novel goes a long way for
Mm,
mental rest for me.
that makes sense. What about you, Christine? What are you doing for intellectual wellness?
Well, I think I'm going to take a page out of something we talked about with the get curious,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Get curious. Because I have noticed that my oldest daughter and I lately have been like,
okay.
and we both are on the spectrum. And
Mm,
so, just what you said, Kate, I think lately I've been thinking, oh, she's responding that way. That much, like I'm coming from where I would feel it in my body, because lately she's been like, Mom, quit asking me that. Like, because I'm reading her wrong. So I just gotta get curious and find out what's going on. And I just I also have to say, Kate, I think you said something today that sparked something in me that has kind of been a joke in my family for years.
mm,
But I think you were explaining something, and what came up for me was about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, like I'm done. And everybody makes a joke about it in my family, like, oh, Christine's done. But I realized, oh, it's because I'm overstimulated from the day. And
Mm.
when I'm done, I'm done. Like, I'm done.
Mhm.
Gotta go get in the bathtub. Gotta go read my book. Gotta go. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Don't. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like if you can name that for them and actually
Right?
like if you can make it a joke, like if you can be compassionate about it so that the joke is actually
Right.
this is just the way it goes. And
I
like
mean, we've been joking about it for years in my family, but I really never attached it to my
yeah.
ADD. Like, I
Yeah.
really never until today in this show. And I'm like, how old? Like, what? Of course, that's what it is. I'm uncomfortable because I'm tired. I'm done. Like, all the things, right?
Mhm.
But it's kind of over the top. That's why it's always funny and a joke. And I've always just been like, oh, yeah, that's who I am. Like, people who barely know me are like, oh, wow, you're done. Oh, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah. And I'm betting, like you were asking this question earlier about like what is it that I have done, like that things are easier. And one of the things that's
Right.
happened is that you probably notice it's time to rest before you're done more often.
Absolutely, I do. It's rare that I get to that point that I'm overdone
Yeah.
because but I also have my folks trained so well that if it gets to a certain time, they're like, "You okay?" Like, oh yeah, I'm checking in with myself. I'm good. I can
Yeah.
go a little bit longer. But like all my friends know, like, and I don't do business at certain times of day. Like, I'm like, because I can't. It's not that, and I used to when I carried caseloads years ago, and I was 24/7. I would tell my folks, like, if you call after a certain amount of time, tell me your name, your child's name, give me a scenario of the situation. It's not that I don't know you. I just don't function at certain.
I need some help getting into like
Yeah.
remembering.
Mhm. Orientating myself, right.
That's
What you have
exactly.
going on, yeah.
Right. What
That's
about you,
good.
Shannon? What's your wisdom in action this week?
Ooh, I think mine is sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. And we talked about intellectual wellness at the high school today, shared our chapter and our books, right? And again, that's where I am leading the staff. It is at the end of my training. So now, as a kitchen manager, I'm being more vocal, and they're about to meet me as a manager officially because they do not know me yet. And that's okay, but we talk about leading from a certain place on the podcast, right? And I really take that seriously, especially being in the kitchen, trying to make it a fun environment, and making sure we live up to these test kitchen standards. So sharing is caring. That's mine.
Kate, thank you so much. Thank you for your work in the world. Will you tell folks about your new coaching academy and how they can connect with you before we say goodbye?
Yeah. So the coaching academy is for coaches who are trying to get better at this sort of bigger picture neurodiversity inclusiveness in their coaching, whether they are coaches who are specializing in supporting neurodivergent clients or coaches who want to make sure that if people who happen to be neurodivergent show up in their practices, that they're actually being helpful and not being harmful. That full spectrum we're trying to help. Right now, we're offering a series of master classes once a month. And we are currently at work on a specialization program so that people can get a deeper dive and actually feel like they're confident in this area and are able to sort of talk to their clients and say, yeah, I can handle this. And so people can find us at neurodiversitycoachingacademy.com. And if people want to find me specifically on LinkedIn, I'm Kate Arms. Kate Arms Coach is my handle there, and katearms.com is my personal website.
And
Beautiful.
we will put all of that into our show notes so folks can find you. So if you're driving, you don't feel like you have to pull over and write it down. You can find it on our show notes.
Yeah.
And we're just so grateful for the work that you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. So important. You're not crazy. You're not any of these things if you feel like you're noticing things. And I love connecting people to the resources who have done the work, have done the research, and have amazing products that they can tailor to their needs. So more soon. Grateful to be connected.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Kate.
Have a great night. Oh, beautiful.
Good stuff. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, thinking about those the kids in her middle school class, it's not easy or comfortable when you feel like you're this other person on the outside and you're trying to find stuff that works for you with what you have going on in life. So I
Oh,
love a
middle
good
school's so brutal. I can't tell you how many times I was,
yeah, yeah, it's
ugh.
crazy. No.
It is so like it's hard anytime, I think, but
Yeah,
especially if you are a little bit outside of the norm,
mhm,
right? But what is norm anyway? Like, I don't know. This is a whole
yeah,
nother conversation.
that is a whole nother
So,
conversation.
right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything we need to lift up or shout out before we close episode 153?
I think that my only other question, I guess my question is more for you. Do you have any other resources that have been super helpful and you think that somebody, if they feel like they're on the spectrum or know that they are, could tap into to get the help that they need?
Oh, there are so many good resources out there. And what I would say to folks is look around, right? I have some old school resources.
Yeah.
The book that literally I feel like saved my life was I'm Not Lazy, Crazy, or Stupid. It
See?
is, I discovered it back in college
Mhm,
and it just made the world make sense to me. I mean,
mhm,
it is old school. I think they've updated it recently, but just getting those labels off
mhm.
and now like I follow people on Instagram, like there's ADHD magazines, there's people like Kate who do the coaching and her coaching academy. um like if you're there's apps now for
Mhm.
folks on the spectrum that can help you to stay tuned, and there's I do coaching, Kate does coaching, we can get you connected if you or your loved one needs somebody, like all kinds of things. And one of my favorites is tools is body doubling. Like
Mhm.
it's how I live my life is in
Yeah.
partnership power and body doubling.
Yes.
Like, people are always like, Christine, how do you do what you do? Oh, there's body doubles involved.
Mhm. Yes.
Which, for folks who don't know what that is basically you just have a person that's working alongside with you.
Mhm,
They may be working on the same thing or the same project, or they
mhm.
may be working on something completely different, but they're grounding you while you do it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's super fun. Thanks for
I
asking.
love it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
This is I could talk about this for a long time. Like I have been working with, in, throughout, alongside with this for how many years now?
Mhm,
30 plus years. And it's, I've definitely decided it's my superpower,
mhm.
and grateful and grateful that the world is not just one type of person. Like we'd
Mhm.
be bored.
Oh my can't imagine. Right, don't want to.
Right?
That's not what I'm using my intellectual wellness for.
Right?
I hear you, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we will be back live at 5 next week, guys. Thank you so much for listening to us, for joining us for us and Kate's conversation on intellectual wellness for episode 153. We'll see you here next week. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. Peace.